In this video, we'll be looking at string manipulation in C#. I've already created my project and the name of the project is String Manipulation. So you may pause the video here and create your console application project, call it String Manipulation, and then we can pick up from there. Now, today we just want to focus on some of the tips and tricks and quick ways to process strings in C#. Now, strings are an essential part of any programming language. They represent, well, I would say 90% of the content that would be passing through your application. Everything that is input into your program through the use of a keyboard pretty much comes in as a string, and it is important to understand the tools that C# has available to us. Now, I've started off by declaring a string variable and I'm calling it full name, and I have a sentence here. My name is, and I have a spelling error, is Trevoir Williams. Now, we've been doing this for a while now, and if not, then that's fine. To print to screen, we say console, which is a static class given to us by C#, and then we have the function inside of that static class called writeLine. And then we specify the string to be printed. Now, this string can be something that we're going to type specifically, and a string always comes inside quotation marks, or it can be the contents of a variable that is of type string. So full name is of type string. And of course, we have to make sure we get our cases properly. And then this will print the contents of our variable to the console. Let us test how that works. So I'm going to change my startup project, string manipulation, and start. And there we go. Hi, my name is Trevoir Williams. So our console.writeLine printed the contents of our variable to our console. Now let's move on to concatenation. Now I just declared two more variables, one called first name, one called last name. And then I would like to print out one contiguous block of string. Contiguous is another way of saying continuous. And that string should have my name is, and then have the first name and the last name. So concatenation is the technique by which we join the contents of strings together. So I'm going to console.writeLine, and then I'm going to put in some static string, and then this is going to say my full name is. So when we say static string, that means that unless we come into our code and make an adjustment here, this will never change. However, variables are easier to change because then we can use them to collect user input and its contents would be defined based on what is being assigned to it. However, there are times when we want to dynamically print what's in a variable alongside something that is static. So concatenation allows us to join static text onto variable text, or variable text onto variable text, or even static text onto static text. The underlying principle is that they're all strings. Now, there are a few ways to concatenate, and the first one that I would want to show you is by using a curly brace, and then we're going to close. So we have curly brace 0, and then curly brace, and then I'm going to put a space, curly brace 1, curly brace. Now, in effect, these are what you call placeholders, and they start counting from 0. So as many placeholders as you have, or you're going to create as many placeholders for as many variables as you'd like to concatenate into the static string, and you start counting from 0. So 0 will be the first one, then 1 the second, and then the third one would be 2, but then we only have 2 variables, so it's 0 and 1, first name and last name. Note, the space is also important because it will print back the string exactly how it is formatted inside of the quotation marks. So after placing our placeholders there, we have to come out of the string and press comma, and then we put in the variables in the very order to match the placeholders as intended. So I want to say my full name is first name and last name. So that means I need to put the variable that has the content for the first name followed by the variable that has the content for the last name. And then this can happen for as many strings as we have, as many string variables as we have. Another way to concatenate, and I'll just duplicate this line. I'll just rewrite it. So console.writeLine, and rewrite our sentence, my full name is, and then I can use the plus sign. So I would write my full name is as my static text, press the plus sign, and then say first name, and then a plus sign. And then because I would want to add a space between the first name and the last name values, I would have to put another block of string, press space, and then close that block of string, and then plus sign, and then last name. So essentially, I'm doing like string mathematics. I'm just adding as many strings as I need to join them, and then all of this will be printed out in one continuous line. So I'm going to get the static text, my full name is, with that space, see that space between the colon and the end quotation mark. Then I add the first name, and then I have to add another space, and then I'm adding the last name. The third way to concatenate, after writing console.writeLine, is by doing what we call interpolation. So in this instance, we actually start off our string with a $sign, then we open quotation marks, and then this allows us to use a curly brace and input our variable directly inside of the quotation marks. So then I can say my full name is space, and then just inject the first name, have a space, and then inject last name. All of this still inside of the quotation marks. Now let's test all three of these and see that they work the same way. There we go. 3 different techniques, same sentence. My full name is Trevoir Williams. Notice the spaces are all there. And once again, it all depends on how you format your text in the static parts. Now let's move on to counting the length of our string. If I wanted to know how many letters were in my first name, then I would need to find the count of the content. So remember that I'm putting it in a variable, and if we were allowing the user to enter content into this variable, I would not know at any point what the value of first name is. However, I do want to know. I wanted to probably build a program that allowed people to just type in their name and then tell them your name is X characters long. So to find the length of a string, I would need firstly an integer variable, and I'm just going to call this int length because I need somewhere to store the length value. And then I'm going to call the string variable by its name, so first name. Then I can say dot, and then I go to the function, or property rather, length. So the difference between a function and a property is that you may call functions using the parentheses, but then there are times when you have to use the dot operator. And when we get into the explanation of object-oriented programming, then I'll explain that dot operator a bit more. But once we say some variable, some string variable, and then we say dot, and I'll just remove the length, and then we control space, we can see that we have a host of properties shown by the wrench and functions shown by the cube. So if I say dot length, it is now getting back the length of whatever string or whatever value this string variable has. So I'm going to run this program, and I believe my name is 7 characters long. So I'm going to put that theory to the test. I did that prematurely. I did not put the console.writeLine. So console.writeLine, and we're writing the value of the variable length. And there we go. So my name is indeed 7 characters long. Please note that spaces also count as values. So if I found the length of full name, and I'll just duplicate these 2 lines and then do another print, but this time I'm going to say I want the length of full name. And let me just say length 1. So I'm printing the value of length 1 this time. And then I'm going to see what value that yields. Then my sentence that is in the variable full name is actually 31 characters long, because HI, comma, space, that's 4 characters, and then all of them add up. So everything that is between the quotation marks will be counted in the calculation of the length. C# makes it easy for us to replace the contents or parts of a string, but I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So once a string is declared, then you cannot just run the function and change the value of the string. You'll have to put an operation like a replacement inside of another variable, and then you may use that variable. So I'm going to have to declare a new variable, string new name, and then I'm going to make it equal to the first name dot replace. And then the replace function takes 2 characters. It takes the old char and the new char. old char meaning what letter or character or symbol, whatever it is that is in the string that I want to remove, what is it? So I want to replace the letter T, and then I say comma. I notice that the char has the single quotation marks. So char is not double quotation marks like string, but it is single quotation marks. And then we are replacing the T with, let's say, a K. I've never seen my name spelled like that, or any variation of my name that starts with a K, but the new name is going to be first name dot replace any T with the letter K. And then let's just write that to the console and then see the output of that operation. All right, there we go. So it looked inside of my name and it found the T and replaced it with a K. Now let's try one with some more letters. So let's say I wanted to replace all the I's in Williams with O's. So I'm going to just repeat this operation down below. And then this time I'm doing it on last name. So last name dot replace, and I'm replacing I with O. And then I'm doing new name 1, and I'm printing new name 1 to the console, and let's see what happens. All right, so every instance of an I got replaced by the new char, which is O. Like I said, this can be with any character. So if I wanted to replace the I's with an @ sign or a hashtag or a number, whatever it is, as long as it can fit in between these quotation marks and it's just one, and if I put 12, let's see what happens if I put 12. Then I'm getting an error saying too many characters in character literal. So once again, a character is only singular, all right? So it's either going to be empty or it's going to be, even if it's empty, if I wanted a space, I have to put a space, but I can't have it with no content or with more than one characters. All right, so I'll leave that as O. Now let's move on to comparing strings. Now from time to time, we probably will want to compare something that is entered maybe by a user and it's stored in a variable with some string that we know and expect. So we want to do a compare, or we want to compare 2 bits of input, like maybe when somebody types in a password the first time and then they have to retype it the second time, you want to compare the two just to make sure that they type the same thing both times. Now, you can always use an if statement. We went through if statements, so you can say if, and I'm going to use 2 variables that I have here already, first name, last name. So what if I wanted to compare and see if the first name and last name had the same values? So I can always say if first name is equivalent to last name. So that's an easy way to compare them. So of course, we can say if they are equal, then we say console.writeLine, you have the same name for first and last. All right. So we're telling them that, okay, you have the same name for first and last, else, and then I'm going to say you have a different name for first and last. So there is always that option of the if else. That's perfectly fine. But then sometimes this might be kind of inaccurate. So then sometimes you want to say something like string, and that's capital S string. And you can actually write a common S string. The C# will see them interchangeably. And then you have an option that says compare. So you can say string dot compare, and then you pass in the strings that you want to compare, string A and string B. So string A would be first name, and that is the one that you want to compare with last name. So you see there are many ways to do the same operation, but then this one is kind of, okay, it's straightforward. It's going to say if they are equivalent, then do this, else do that. This is going to return an integer, so I'll have to store the return value inside of a variable. So I'm going to say int result is equal to string.compare, first name, comma, last name. And then I'm going to have to do an if statement around result. So you can have 3 potential results from this operation. It can either be equal to 0, it can be or 1 or -1. When it is 0, that means that the 2 strings are equal. All right, so when it's a 0, when this operation, string.compare with two strings, returns a 0, so I can say if result is equivalent to 0, then it would evaluate to the same thing as first name being equal to last name. Then I can print you have the same first name and last name, right? And then I can say else also, because then if it's a 1 or a -1, those simply mean that they're not equal. But then when it's 1, it means that the first string is probably bigger or has more characters than the second string. All right, so when it's a 1, it just means that, okay, the first string is longer than the second string. And when it's -1, it's the other way around. But the essential thing to note is that if you do this approach, then results should be equivalent to 0 to certify that the two strings are the same. All right, so these are two ways that you can compare strings. You can use whichever one is appropriate to you at the time. Now, previously, when you were looking at input and output programs, you would see where when you're receiving a number or you intend to receive something to store into a numeric variable or some variable that is not already a string, that you had to convert from the string to that data type. Well, sometimes you will need to do the reverse. So you would have seen that in concatenation earlier, that you can actually concatenate your string with almost any data type and it will accept it. But there are times when you need to convert to string. So converting to string is really easy though. So I have an integer variable here already, so I'm just going to reuse this variable. And note, if you have a variable already and you want to change the value, you don't have to specify the data type again. I can just say result is equal to 0 right here to force it to that, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. And notice I have plus signs, so I'm going to have to remove those. Sorry. All right. No spaces. So now I have result, which is an integer, being equal to a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. That's one big integer result. Now, if I wanted to store this in a string, I wanted to say string big number is equal to, and then I wanted it to have the contents of result, then I will get an error. Simply because it's going to say I cannot convert or implicitly convert an integer into a string, which is fine. That's fair. So remember that integers are used for math pretty much. And once it's a string, it won't be doing that kind of math. So if I wanted to convert my integer into maybe a string for whatever reason, I can just look at the variable that I intend to convert and say dot. And then there's a magical function that says to string. So I just say result dot to string, and then it will convert that into a string. And then once it's a string, it is less hassle to concatenate, because there's not every situation that is going to be so forgiving that you can just plug an int into a sentence and it won't throw an error. All right. So there are times when you will want to do a conversion. So I'm just going to print my bank account. My bank balance is big number. All right. So my bank balance is big number. And then that will just print out that sentence with this newly created string. Now, once again, once it's a string, even though the content looks numeric, I cannot go ahead and perform an operation that says int total. Maybe I got a $1 payment today, so I want to add that $1. So I'm going to say 1 plus, and then I can't just say 1 plus big number. All right, that will throw an error because I'm trying to do arithmetic here where I'm adding the number 1 to something that is now a string. I cannot do that. So I will have to, of course, just keep it integer in nature. And then if I need total to be a string afterwards, then I can convert by saying dot to string. Now, I made this example with numbers, but then this is not unique to numbers. You can convert char to string. You can convert double to string. You can convert almost anything to string. There are restrictions on maybe arrays and other collection types, but the fact is, once you see this operation, or if you want to know if you have that operation available to you, you can just type your variable out and then use your dot operator, and then you can just see if it is listed there for you in IntelliSense. All right, so I'm just going to run this program and then we're going to look at all of our examples printing to screen. All right, so just a quick run through. We printed our first sentence, which was found in the full name variable. We looked at the 3 different types of concatenation, one with the placeholders, one with plus signs, and one with interpolation. We found the length of our first name variable value, as well as the length of our sentence. We did a string replace on all T's in my name and all I's in my surname. And then we did a string comparison where both results would have had the fact that it's a different name for first and last after comparing the first name value with the last name value. And then we did a string conversion for our variable, for our integer variable that represents our account balance. In closing this lesson, I'm just going to say that this is just the touch of the surface. The C#'s string manipulation capabilities are very extensive, and it would require a much longer explanation and video to actually go through every single thing that it is capable of. But that being said, I encourage you to experiment and just type out, create a string variable, and then just use your dot operator to see all of the other functions that are available to you. So you can just have your variable, first name, and then you say dot, and then everything that is here, Visual Studio, has an explanation as to what it is for. All right, so I encourage you to just go ahead and experiment. Just type a sentence and run each one of these and print to the console and see what the outcome is.